Let me tell you what my deep research and basically vision is.
I hope there's Bigfoot. I don't think there is.
I'm not telling you nothing.
The aliens won't let it happen.
Happening now, breaking.
Bernie Sanders is angry.
Bears beats Battlestar Galactica.
What are the tips? Give me some tips on how to work with Wes Anderson.
Be ready to speak very fast and very clearly, because that's definitely one key thing.
I will only tell the truth.
Until you and 6 kids you barely know in wet bathing suits have surrounded 9 chimpanzees outside of a Wendy's. You probably really don't know yourself, okay?
Yep. And we back.
Hello and welcome. You're listening to your new favorite podcast and the best in political, sports, and paranormal news coverage. I'm your host, Wes Anderson, and this is In the Shed. This is episode 41, so whether you're coming back for more or finding us for the first time this week, hey, thanks for tuning in. It is late Thursday night, June the 2nd, and I am in a shed in the backyard of my home in Alabama, also I can hang out with you tools and talk about the latest headlines, stories, and rumors in the world of politics, sports, and the paranormal. My guest tonight is my best friend, my wife of almost 9 years, and my better half, Charsy Anderson. Charsy, it's been a while since you've been in the shed. What do you think?
It's very hot.
Yeah, it's June. We ain't got no AC. I'll be out here. I'll be telling y'all. I'll be out here if it's 100 degrees. I'll be out here if it's 32 degrees. And it's all for you, my tools. It's all for you, my babies. I've been trying to get Charsy to come on the show for a while. I've been trying to get her to be on one of our regular news episodes because when I share with her the articles that I've gotten and putting together for the episode, she always has some pretty funny commentary on it. And who would I have a better time covering the news with than my best friend? But I'm equally excited to have her on for this episode, a conversation episode. In addition to the news episodes, one thing that we're trying to do is to have important conversations and conversations that we think other people should hear. And so I wanted to have Charsy on to talk about her story, to talk about overcoming trauma, to talk about breaking destructive cycles in your family, to talk about motherhood and parenting. She's one of the most resilient people and one of the strongest people that I've ever known. And her story is one that should be shared. So Charsy, why don't you share a little bit about yourself with our listeners?
Well, I'm a mom to 2 wonderful children who I love very much. I work in the social services field. I'm currently working as an advocate for people with intellectual disabilities, and I'm really enjoying it. It's not something that I ever really imagined myself doing, but I actually am really loving it.
I guess to start telling the story of you, why don't you share with us a little bit about where you were born, what was it like, what do you remember, when did you come to the U.S., that kind of thing?
Well, I was born in Micronesia, which is made up of 4 small islands. It's near Guam and the Philippines, for people who know where those places are. I don't really remember a lot, but I do remember it being very impoverished. It was like a lot of foreign places you might go to. Like, you have the really beautiful part that looks very touristy, but then on the flip side, there's, very impoverished areas. So I have pictures of when I was little, living in a hut that my mom and dad built with a dirt floor. So that's kind of the memory that I have of that. And then when I was about 4 years old, we moved to the States.
So you grew up, or at least were born in Micronesia on the island of Ponape. Did you have running water? What was life like there?
We had running water in some areas, like to take a bath or a shower. It was kind of like a community shower with tin walls around, and we had some running water. But for the most part, no electricity, no air conditioning for sure. And the houses were built you built your own house.
So your mom was from Micronesia. Your father was from the States. How did they meet?
My dad was over there for work, and so that's how he met my mom.
Okay, so at the age of 4, your parents, who are now married, have you, or do they have other children yet at this point?
At this point, it's me and my brother Austin.
And all of you came to the United States to where?
The memory that I have from when we came to the United States is coming to Georgia, and it was around Christmas time, I think, because I remember seeing Christmas lights up and going to see Santa.
And in some ways, if you think about it, at least on one side of your family, you're actually a first-generation American. And since your father is from the U.S., you and your brothers, even though 2 of the 3 of you were born overseas, you actually have dual citizenship. Is that how that works?
Yep, I do.
And so your mom, you guys get to the United States. At that point, your mom had spent her entire life in Micronesia. Did she speak much English? Did she have much in the way of education? What was life like for your parents when they first got back over this way?
My mom probably could speak a little bit of English just from some things that my dad probably taught her, but for the most part, she learned English by watching TV.
Yeah, there's a whole category of people in India that are currently learning English from listening to me, your humble correspondent, Wes Anderson. So how about you? You got here when you were 4. So did you, pretty quickly after arriving in the States, you started kindergarten?
Yeah, not too much longer. I remember my mom working with me a lot before I even started kindergarten, to teach me the alphabet and all these other things, because of course I'm coming in with no preschool, no daycare, nothing like that. So she worked really hard to try to get me ready, which is kind of funny to think about because she also was learning things at the same time.
Yeah, here's a mom that has learned English mostly from her relationship with your father and from television, and she's trying to teach you enough English to be a passable kindergarten student.
Which I was.
Which you were.
I got the Most Improved Student Award.
Yeah, I love to tell people, this is, my wife does not love this about me, but I love to tell people that she got the Most Improved Student back in kindergarten, because at the beginning of the year, you spoke no English.
Yeah, I mean, how much more could somebody improve?
By the end of the year, you like straight A's, reading on the 3rd grade level, like, what's up, people? I'm here. So what jobs did your parents work when you guys were growing up, or in Georgia, life in general? What was your childhood like? What was their relationship like? What was their relationship with you guys like? What was life like for a young Charsy?
It was kind of chaotic when I look back at it. I remember my dad helping my mom fill out job applications because, of course, she couldn't really fill them out. And they'd be places like Shoney's and restaurants. I remember my dad working at a car lot. I think he worked kind of fixing up the cars and cleaning them. And then they also would do like side jobs. Like they had a washer appliance repair business at one point. So I remember just all these random washers and dryers being at our house.
And where did you guys live?
We lived for a while in Georgia, And then when I was in 3rd grade, we moved to Florida.
Did you live in apartments with family?
Well, first when we moved to Florida, we literally lived in a tent. We lived at Big Lagoon State Park.
Camp out.
Yeah, when you're a kid, you think, oh, we're camping. But as I've gotten older, I realized, oh, we were actually living in a tent. It wasn't for fun. It was because we didn't have anywhere else to go.
Yeah. And what was childhood like for you? What trauma did you face? What examples did you see? How did your parents get along? How did they get along with you guys as kids? What was life like?
Life was very messy and very, I know I say chaotic, but that's really the best way to describe it. There wasn't a lot of consistency. My parents did not get along well. It was very much a roller coaster ride as far as their relationship, and the environment that we grew up in was very, very broken. I think I wanna say that my parents tried, but they also had their own addictions and things that they battled with every day. And so, you know, my dad, he was an alcoholic for as long as I can remember. I mean, I don't remember much, or if any, time that he was not. So that a lot of the chaos and a lot of the trauma of our lives kind of came from all of that, and all of the addiction, and all of the just mess that comes with that.
So your mom was an immigrant, English as a second language, working odd jobs. Your dad struggling with issues of alcoholism, not getting along, the two of them, maybe not getting along with you guys as kids, moving from living in tents to trailers to houses to rent. What kind of effects, now that you're an adult looking back, what type of effect does that type of environment and lifestyle have on young children that are learning about the world and trying to make sense of everything around them?
I think it has an immense effect. I think it has long-lasting effects, and I think the effects, they reach much farther than what we can really comprehend when you're at that stage of life. Even now, I'm still dealing with the repercussions of the things that I experienced as a child, the things that I was exposed to, the things that maybe I wasn't exposed to that I should have been at a younger age. You know, you don't realize how much that affects you and forms you until you're older and you try to function the way that you want to, but your body physiologically won't let you do that. Or, you know, you don't have almost the emotional capacity to do that because you've never seen that, you've never witnessed that, you've never seen it demonstrated for you before. So, like, for me to have a healthy relationship, you know, it's like you might as well be speaking a different language, because I don't know what that looks like. I don't know the steps that it takes to get there, because I've never seen that.
So you didn't see an example of a healthy relationship growing up when it came to your parents, both with each other or them even as parents with their children?
No, and I think I saw a lot of unhealthy examples. And, you know, as a kid, modeling is such a huge thing, and you learn from what you see and what you witness and what you take in with your senses, and you take that in as truth, because they're your parents. They're supposed to love you. They're supposed to, you know, you expect good, and so you just take in whatever they give you. And so that's what I had. That's what I had as an example, and that's what I learned from. And I really didn't know much else. And the times that I was exposed to other things, I don't think I really understood that what I experienced was not normal.
And can you think of like an example that might flesh this out for people who are listening, as far as like what are a couple of things that as a child were normal to you, or that you thought were normal, that now as an adult you say that's not how things were supposed to be?
Yeah, I think, even having my own kids and seeing like the security that we provide for them, and how they don't really worry about food and where they're gonna stay, it makes me realize even more drastically how chaotic and how there was such a lack of a sense of security growing up. Because as a kid, I worried about those things, like not having enough food to eat, knowing that there was, we didn't have a lot of money. And there's a difference in, not having tons of money and not having enough money to live. I have very vivid memories of coming home and eviction notice being on the door and us having to move again. We moved a lot. And I have, lots of memories of my parents jumping from job to job to job, and us moving and, moving from one trailer to another, utilities getting cut off, and yeah, just memories like that.
Yeah, so you and your siblings had to carry burdens and have an awareness about the hardship of life as children that really is only appropriate for adults to have an understanding of. Would you say that's fair?
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think, now, like, our kids can ask us for whatever, but I never really felt that. I mean, of course, as a kid, you ask for stuff, but there was also always, like, this underlying fear of it not being there, not having the access to it. And it wasn't just, my parents didn't make enough money. It was, my dad, couldn't keep his job because he's drinking too much and not going to work, or, he hasn't been home for 3 days or whatever because he's been out drinking.
So what was it like to grow up in a home where the father, who is supposed to be your protector and is supposed to be the one that is watching out for the rest of you, where he is in the throes of alcoholism? What is that like to grow up in that environment?
I think it made me super lonely. I felt like nobody really was there, or even if they were, like, they understood what was happening, because there was always this don't talk about it, don't tell people about it, especially when my dad was working at a church. You don't talk about that, you don't bring it up, even when you get asked by the school council.
There was a level of secrecy.
Yeah, there's definitely a level of secrecy. You never talked about that. You never talked about the fighting that took place, or, the level to which it rose as far as it becoming abusive, which is hard for me to even accept at this stage of my life, because I never would identify myself as somebody that had been abused. But then when I look at specific examples of things that happened to us as children, I work in social services. I would classify that as abuse, but even now it's hard for me to accept that, because for so long I detached myself from that and separated it as a survival mentality.
Right.
And just to make it.
Yeah, and your father struggled with alcoholism and all the things that come with that. What about your mom? Was your mom a more stable presence in the home? What was going on with her as you were growing up?
No, she was not. I don't really know. I didn't really understand a lot growing up. I just know that when they didn't get along, my mom, coming from where she came from and not having a lot of education and not having a lot of life experience, I think she lacked the ability to communicate a lot, and she lacked a lot of emotional maturity. I also think that carrying some of the junk of what it means to be with somebody who has an addiction also affected her. But she also had her own thing. She also had, her own addictions. I think that was one thing that we saw or felt a lot growing up, was that our parents always chose their vices and their addictions over their children. My mom would go and be gone for hours and we wouldn't know where she was, and she'd be out playing bingo because that was her addiction. She was gambled. I don't know, to what extent, but that was what I remember as a kid in middle school, in elementary school, her being gone. And we wouldn't know where she was. We'd just be at home by ourselves, and she would be gone and my dad would be gone, probably drinking.
So when your dad is on an extended bender, drinking, gone from the home, your mom's at bingo, who's taking care of you and your brothers?
I think we just took care of each other. I remember helping take care of my youngest brother a lot, because we are 7 years apart. So I feel like I definitely took on that, I guess, maternal role in a lot of aspects. But I think we just, for us, that was life. Like, we didn't know anything.
It was normal for you.
Yeah, we didn't really know anything else. That was normal.
And did you guys have, did you have food in the pantry? Did you have birthday parties? Did you have clothes to wear? Was it a normal childhood in those ways?
No. I think I like to think in my head sometimes that it was not as bad as it was, but when I watch old videos and see how my room is so bare, and I see the clothes that I was wearing, and I see the kind of place that we lived in, it makes me remember it was bad. And I don't know if I'll really ever understand that or really be able to remember that. And I think part of me doesn't want to, because that was such a hard point in life. And as a child, you just, there's a sense of innocence.
Yeah, and I know even since we have been married almost 9 years, shout out to us, even since we've been married, there have been times that you have shared with me a memory that is just like something you just remembered for the first time, like a revelation, like, oh my gosh, I remember one time this happened. And it's like a lot of your childhood comes to you in that way, that you have memories that are not as easily accessible as what most people have when they think about their childhood. Where does that come from?
Well, I know that through going to therapy and counseling, that has been a way for my brain to protect itself from all of the trauma. And in some ways, I'm grateful, because when I do have one of those random memories or something that will trigger a memory, it can be really overwhelming. It can be really jarring, because here I am, 30 years old, living life and trying to heal and move forward, and all of a sudden, I'm smacked in the face with 4-year-old me who has a black eye, and I'm trying to figure out why, and I'm trying to remember how that's possible and make sense of it, even now at 30.
And did your parents, did they stay married, or how long were they married for? What was all that like?
They didn't stay married. When I was in high school, my parents had always had a very toxic relationship, up and down, fighting. I remember several times where my mom left and we would go live somewhere else, or one time she literally took us out in the field, out by the trailer that we lived, and we like slept on the ground. And I remember waking up inside the trailer again because my dad had gone out and gotten us.
Because she was mad at your father?
Because she was mad.
So you all went into a field and slept?
She just carried us out there into the field, and we were asleep out there. And I remember waking up and realizing that my dad had brought us back inside. But for her, that's how she dealt with that. And so a lot of times she would leave. She would leave and go stay with a friend. She would leave and go, rent her own trailer. So that was not really, a new thing. But in high school, she did leave without telling anybody. She left. We just got home from school one day and her stuff was gone, and that was it. And we didn't hear from her for a while. And she had gone, I think, to Hawaii.
Just up and left Florida and her family and just gone to Hawaii.
Yeah.
For how long?
I honestly don't remember. I want to say it was months, maybe a year.
Okay. So by the time you hit high school, which, high school is that coming of age time where you really start to sort out who you are and who you want to be and what you believe and what you're into and what's important to you. High school kids are trying on all these different identities. You have immigrated to the United States and learned English. You have been in a home with parents that struggle with addiction, that model toxic relationships, that are kind of non-committal toward each other and even sometimes towards the role of parenting, who fight in ways that aren't healthy, who are abusive. What does that do to someone that's in the stage of trying to figure out life, and where did you find yourself as a teenager?
I think I tried. I wanted so desperately, just like a normal teenager, to fit in. But, there was always this other layer. You have your normal teenage angst stuff and problems, but there was always this extra layer. And so, I tried to do like the normal teenage things, but I think at a certain point, of course, I had no sense of security, nothing to really keep me grounded, so to speak.
Did you struggle with anxiety, depression, issues of self-worth, even the ability to deal with problems in a healthy way at that point?
Yeah, I think I know I definitely made some poor choices, and I think I didn't have anybody watching me really, and I felt like I didn't really have anybody that cared. I think to a certain degree my dad tried to sometimes when my mom was gone, but he was also dealing with his own stuff. So there was a certain point where everybody just kind of not separated physically, but we were all kind of just dealing with the pain. And I really just bottled all that up, and for the longest time I didn't know how to process through conflict and emotions and anything like that, and I would just bottle it up and I would just shove it away and I would shut down. And that's exactly what my mom would do. She would shut down to the point where she would stay in her room for days and not come out. And so that was kind of the pattern that I started to recreate, as I would just shut down. Because I didn't grow up with a family where you talked about your feelings or talked about why you're upset, because why you're upset is because your dad is drinking all the time and comes home, totally wasted, or comes to pick you up from your 5th grade field trip and he's totally drunk. So you can't talk about your problems because your problems are your parents.
You can't talk about your problems because your problems are your parents. That's a heavy sentence, a heavy reality for a child to grow up under. So it kind of sounds like your family, you guys were all siloed off, for the most part, just facing life alone. Your parents just doing their own thing, worrying about themselves and their problems and their issues, and you guys just kind of on your own trying to survive.
Mm-hmm.
So I've said on the podcast before that I'm a man of faith. If you're not, that's okay. This is a big tent and we got room for you. But I am a man of faith. And there's something the Bible talks about, generational curses. And people might hear that and roll their eyes because of the misunderstanding that because of the sins of a father, that generation after generation are being punished. But generational curses in the sense that the patterns that exist, an example that is set by parents and grandparents and those who are in influence over you and who are raising you, that those things tend to persist in your life. That those things seem to show up in your behaviors, in your thinking, in your actions. That those destructive habits get passed down from generation to generation. That's a very real thing. Is that something that you and your brothers experienced as an everyday reality?
Yeah, I think, we saw what life was like growing up, and we all wanted something totally different.
Yeah.
And so we all went after life hoping that we would be able to separate ourselves from that and find something different.
And where do you find hope? If you're a child growing up the way that you did, how do you see the world in a positive way? How do you believe that you can accomplish good things? How do you make it from day to day?
I think it's hard to see it in the moment sometimes, but for a lot of it, I find hope in the people that God had placed in my life at that time. And I can see all the different moving pieces that work together to really make miracles happen. Because to go from living in chaos and poverty to actually experiencing healing and growth and striving to live a life that really represents that. I mean, I can only give all that to God.
So what role did faith play in your life in the midst of all of this chaos, and how did you get connected to faith in God through all of this?
Well, when I was in high school and after my mom left, my dad started working at a church, and he was the building manager. So he did like custodial work. And I remember asking him, do we have to go to church? And he said, you don't have to, but I would like for you to be there. And I think at this time, he was either still drinking or he was about to start going to AA consistently. So this was like a short period of time where he was trying to be sober and trying to do better. And, and I think that was because of his job at the church. So I started going, and, all of the people at the church really just cared for us, and they showed us a lot of love. And to me, that spoke, that was huge, because I didn't have that. I didn't even know what that really was. So to me, that was just something that was very meaningful and affected me, and really, I think, just allowed me to have an open heart and an open mind to faith.
Mm-hmm.
And it was, I had gone to church growing up some every now and then, but it was never a consistent thing.
And I feel like when kids are in the middle of a chaotic upbringing, when these generational curses are present in their life and in their thinking and the examples that they've been given, that in order for them to break the cycle and not repeat those patterns and to overcome that, one thing that they need is steady people in their life, people that show them a different way, people that offer them a hand up, people who are sources of encouragement. During all of this time, who are some of those steady people for you in your life?
One of them was my youth pastor, and I still keep in touch with her to this day. She was somebody that exuded joy, and that was just a real person who I could count on and who I could talk to. She knew, all the stuff for the most part that was going on. Like I said, there's still a level of secrecy, but she was very intentional, and if I needed a ride to church, she would give me a ride. I just remember her being consistent and just being caring and a really just positive presence in my life, and I did not have a lot of that. Mm-hmm. When I think of steady people, I also think of my aunt and uncle. They did not live close, but they did make an effort to see us when they could. And when I see old home videos and stuff of them like bringing us Christmas presents or coming to visit us, or there's one video I watched recently of my aunt holding my youngest brother, and when he was little, like a toddler, and just rocking him to sleep.
They were always there.
They were always there, and they're still there. And
shout out to Auntie Alice and Uncle Dennis. What's up?
And they're some of my most influential people as far as faith, because I've been able to see the gospel play out in real life through them, and through the grace that they have extended and the love that they have poured out. I'm gonna start crying. The love that they have poured out to me and to my brothers. So to me, they live out the gospel.
Yeah, and we talk about generational curses and how these destructive life patterns and examples get passed down from one generation in your family to another. And really your dad and your aunt had those same destructive examples and patterns passed down to them from their father, who was an alcoholic. And your dad replicated those patterns in a lot of ways and for most of his life, whereas your aunt kind of showed you a different way. She showed you what it looks like to start healing and to start breaking those patterns. How did that example and that different example equip you to start healing on your own?
It definitely motivated me and gave me hope, because for a lot of my 20s, I felt like it was hopeless. Like I would just be stuck in this cycle, and I would never be able to heal and to move forward. And she's always been in my corner, encouraging me, telling me that I can move forward, that I can heal, that it's possible. So she says those things to me, but she also sets the example of going to counseling herself and continuing to to work on all of her stuff and all of her trauma that she's experienced. And so I see her doing that, and I see, okay, it is possible. It is possible to break these cycles because she's doing it.
Yeah, and you guys have. She started that ball rolling, and you did for your family. You and your two brothers, despite how you grew up, all of you have college degrees. Two of you are married with children, most of the time happily married. Sometimes I be on that BS, but usually happily married. Where are your parents at today? How is your relationship with your parents?
Well, my dad passed away, and when he passed away, we were not on great terms. So, of course, I've had to process through all of that and all of that baggage. And my mom lives in Iowa, and it's very complicated. I've tried to kind of unpack what that relationship is, and going to counseling, I've had to come face to face with a lot of stuff that I've never really made myself accept before or really take a look at, and I think that's That's why counseling is so hard, because it's not just talking about, oh, I felt like this and this happened. It's like all of a sudden, like, you're seeing different aspects of your life. Like, it's like watching a movie and you're seeing the behind the scenes. And it's your life, but you've never seen it before, and it's a bizarre feeling. And you're having flashbacks to things that you didn't even know about. Like, you knew about them and you were there.
Now you're seeing them with adult eyes and understanding.
Yes. And so for a lot of it, it was hard because I was trying to piece together this puzzle, and I kept feeling like I had so many missing pieces, and it was so confusing because here I am, I do have a relationship with my mom, but at the same time, as I'm sifting through, collecting all these pieces, they don't add up. They don't make sense. They're not fitting together. So a lot of our relationship is built on, this trauma bonding and realizing that my role that I have played for so long to kind of keep the peace, to kind of please everybody, because I don't want anybody to be in conflict, because I lived in conflict for so long. I didn't realize how much of that burden I was carrying
As a child,
and I didn't have to. I always thought, like, it's my job to maintain contact with my mom. It's my job to make sure that we, communicate and have a good relationship, and that she's involved in my life, and that she's involved in my kids' lives. And, going to therapy helped me realize how crazy that was, that it was okay to not do all of those things. And so I had to, like, retrain my brain and make myself realize that I was not a bad daughter for wanting something different, and that I was not a bad person for not communicating or wanting communication with somebody who had abused me and traumatized me. And so dealing with all of that has changed and shifted our relationship, and I know that it's going to be a journey and a continuous thing, but I think at this point in life I'm much more comfortable and at peace with who I am and what my role is, than I've ever been in my life.
Yeah. And so it's not a Lifetime movie. Your father, even in the time that I knew him, was sober sometimes for different lengths at a time, but most of the time was not. And, ultimately, his drinking led to a shortened life, and he's not with us. Your mom and you have not had a remarkable turn in your relationship. She's states away. Y'all do have contact from time to time, but it's not like a happy, wrap a bow on it type ending that you see on Lifetime movies. But even so, you've been able to find peace, and you've been able to find healing. And I think I am learning, and something I have learned from you is that resiliency is a muscle. It's a skill that not all of us possess, because some people like me that did not grow up facing the trauma and the hardship and the tough situations and have to overcome a lot of these relational hardships and generational curses and destructive patterns that you've had to face and overcome. I didn't have a lot that I had to bounce back from. But for you, in order to accomplish anything as a child, or to grow into an adult, to be in healthy relationships, to be a wife, to be a mother, to be a college-educated person, it all required you to be incredibly resilient. It all required you to possess and practice a strength that I don't have. And that's part of why I want you to share your story, and why I think it's important, and why I respect you so much, because I don't know very many people that could experience the things that you have and be the person that you are, that is full of kindness and that is compassionate and that is a steady person for everybody else around you all the time, and that looks at life with an optimism and with a hope. And I do give credit. I do give credit to God, and I do give credit to your aunt and uncle. But I give a lot of credit to you for surviving and for getting to a place, taking your mental health, taking yourself and your well-being seriously enough to make sure that you can be the person that you are today. And you are a wife, and you are a mother, and you work a job in social services, and you have a blog. One of the reasons I wanted to have you on was to talk about your blog that you've started. And I always encourage Charsy to write more. She's a very gifted writer, and she has a perspective that not many have, and she writes from the heart. And sometimes on Twitter, if you follow us there at In the Shed 4, anytime she posts a new blog, I'm posting it to the page, and I'm saying, hey, if you read one thing today, make it this, because it's always so good. But I wanted to just highlight a couple of things that you talked about in your most recent blog posts. So on March 22nd, you wrote a post called "When Your Trauma Won't Die," and I want to read just an excerpt from it, and maybe we can talk about that. But first, your blog is actually called "Where Grace Abounds." Why that title?
Because I feel like through all of the trauma, when you push forward and when you really come out of the other side, that's where the grace abounds, and that's where you see it, and you will see it. Grace
is there for us, even when we can't see it, and even when we're in the midst of hard times, and it is what sustains us. Yeah. So you wrote a blog post called "When Your Trauma Won't Die," and this is the part that I want to share. It says, "I turned 30 last year. Some people are freaked out by turning 30, but I welcomed it with open arms. I was ready to kiss my 20s goodbye. Those were some rough years. I was ready to begin this new season of life. I'd been working on myself, going to therapy, setting boundaries, making some good life changes. I'd come so far, and I was proud. And then it happened. Some little moment that played over and over again in my mind, reminding me so quickly of the mess that I couldn't escape. It didn't come in a big wave, and other things distracted me for a little while. But even now, even today, there's that tiny voice that creeps in when it's silent, when I'm just starting to feel sure of myself and secure in who I am as a wife, a mother, and a sister. All of a sudden, I'm 7 again, and life is chaos. I don't know what security is, and I'm not sure what love is supposed to look like. Sometimes I think love is a gift, bought for me the night after my dad drinks too much. Sometimes love is lying to the school counselor when you get questioned about your parents. Sometimes love is when you go to school exhausted because your parents were up all night fighting with each other. Sometimes love is the confusing tug of war between yelling and hitting. Sometimes love looks like fear and loneliness and lies. So many lies. Flash forward to your 30th birthday. You feel loved and celebrated. Like the real love, the kind that leaves you feeling full of joy and at peace inside. It's taken me so many years to learn what this love is, and also so many years to unlearn what it is not. So anytime when I experience this, I'm just so grateful that this is my life now. That this is a normal part of my life, to feel loved in a healthy way. Why did you write that, and why did you title that post, "When Your Trauma Won't Die"?
For so long, being in counseling, like, you look at counseling as, okay, I'm gonna, so to speak, fix all of these issues. And so I'm like, okay, I'm going to counseling, I'm doing good, I'm in a much better place mentally. But every single time I would feel like I'm making progress, I'm, moving forward, I'm moving past all this stuff. It's like when you're treading water and you think like you're good, and then all of a sudden something pulls you down underneath again and you feel like you're drowning and you can't get back up. And that's what all of those little moments felt like. And I felt like I was trying to end my trauma, and it would just not it wouldn't die. It would never leave me. And it made me feel hopeless for a long time. Like no matter what I did, no matter how much therapy I went to, no matter how many boundaries I set, I would never escape it. I would never be able to just live life.
So how have you started to, because in the excerpt I read, you're talking about going from being a child that doesn't have an idea of what love is supposed to look like to being a 30-year-old that experiences it and that lives in relationships that you feel that real love and where you're sharing that real love. How do you go from one to the other? How do you start to have and to find that healing?
It takes a lot of work, and it takes a lot of persistence and a lot of patience from the people around you and the people supporting you, and also with yourself, because it takes a long time to even feel like you're making any progress or moving forward. And it is a long journey. It's a lifelong journey. And I think just knowing that it's possible and just trying, waking up every day and trying, and knowing that you might not always get it right, you might not always, move forward as far as you had hoped that day, but just to wake up and try, I feel like that's a huge part of it, and to keep moving forward, because it is a difficult thing to go from not knowing what love is to trying to really grasp what that is and then live that out. It's a totally foreign thing. It's like going to a different country and not really knowing where you are and feeling lost.
It seems, at least from an outside perspective, somebody that has been with you as you have been healing and learning and growing, but that also hasn't experienced the same things that you have. To me, it seems like a lot of relearning, a lot of retraining your mind and your thinking. I remember it may have been our very first date. I can't remember. You can correct me. One of our first dates, I think it was the first time we went to dinner together. We didn't know each other that well yet. I did not know much about your family or about how you were raised. I just knew that you were smoking hot and that I thought that you were really sweet, and I just wanted to be around you all the time. And for some reason, I had duped you into dating me, and I took you to dinner, and we were at a seafood restaurant, and I ordered a beer with my dinner, and you burst into tears and ran away from the table. And I was like, I don't know what just happened. Like, I'm not sure what that is about. Because I didn't know that for you, being around alcohol was only ever a destructive thing. And it was something that you did not want to be a part of your life or be around. You had never seen that modeled, the use of alcohol modeled in a way that wasn't terribly unhealthy and that led to things that weren't good. Have you experienced in becoming a wife and becoming a mother and trying to work towards healing, have you experienced a lot of that where you've had to overcome old thinking patterns and things that you just have not seen modeled in a healthy manner before?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like a majority of everything that I learn, I'm having to retrain my brain. And even my unintentioned responses, because sometimes I'll respond and I won't even really understand why I'm responding that way. Like when I responded that way about the beer, I probably didn't even realize in that moment, the immense connection that had and the trauma that I connected the drinking with in that moment, because I didn't know that you could just have a beer with dinner and it be fine. I just thought everybody that drinks just gets totally drunk and destroys their families and goes to jail, and that's what I thought. And so yeah, it's been a lot of retraining, especially with the way that I handle relationships and communication, and even my own ability to regulate my emotions, my thought process of the way that I talk to myself, the way that I process through conflicts. I've had to just retrain myself because it's such a survival mentality to move towards self-preservation mode for me. Whenever I feel like somebody is doing something where they're not showing me that they care, or that I'm not valued, or that I'm not loved, I immediately would move towards self-preservation, which means shut down. I don't care about you. I'm gonna isolate myself from you, distance myself from you as a survival.
Which I would imagine makes it hard to maintain a healthy relationship.
Yes, it does. And I didn't even realize that that it was possible to do something outside of that. I thought that was just the way that I dealt with conflict, and that was it. But the more, I always wanted a good relationship and a good marriage and a healthy family. And the more that I didn't have that and I struggled to get that, it was really frustrating. And so I think I had to come up against some brick walls to realize that I had to make some huge changes.
Yeah, sometimes I was that brick wall, but it was never intentional. And one thing you said that I think is incredibly important, and this is true for everybody, no matter the level of trauma that you faced in your life, is the importance of self-talk. We all talk to ourselves and about ourselves in a certain way. And unfortunately, a lot of us learn negative self-talk. When we talk about ourselves or in our own minds to ourselves, it's in ways that are putting ourselves down, things that are not positive about ourselves, things that, and if you get stuck in a pattern like that, it teaches you to think about yourself in a negative way and to associate yourself with characteristics that are not positive, with failure, with rejection, and you start to believe those things, you start to live into those things start to show up in your day-to-day life and become your reality. And I'm not saying that if you just flip the switch and switch to positive self-talk that it fixes your whole life, but it certainly helps. It certainly has a positive impact on the way that you view yourself and the way that you show up in the world.
Yeah, I definitely agree.
I also wanted to read a excerpt from a blog that you wrote in May. This was leading up to Mother's Day. It's called "What Even Is a Mama?" To become a mama has been one of the greatest, scariest, most healing things I've ever experienced. It's forced me to look back at my own childhood and press on to make something different for my own children. The desire to be a safe home for my kids drives me to do the healing and the work, but man, is it hard. Recently, I had a sweet lady at church turn to me and say, "You do such a great job with those little ones. It just seems like you always know the right thing to do." And I just keep playing that over and over in my head, relishing in the peace and encouragement that it brings to my soul. I had worked, I had read, I had prayed, I had allowed so much inside of me to die so that newness could be born. But in all of that newness, I often felt like I was lost. I felt like I would never be the kind of mother that my children needed me to be. They would need love and safety and security. And the truth was, I didn't know what that looked like. That's a heavy passage. That's the beginning of your blog post. It's a heavy start. But you talk about this lady at church just saying this sweet thing to you, that you're so good with your children. You always know what to do. You're so patient. And how like that really meant something to you, because even though you desire to do those things and be those things for them, you never experienced those things as a child. It's almost like you're learning to fly the plane while it's being built around you in the air. How has your childhood, the trauma that you faced, the healing process, how is all of that, how have you experienced that as a parent?
Yeah, it's almost comical to think about the fact that she said those words to me, because in my mind I'm like, ma'am, I know nothing. Yeah, becoming a parent was terrifying. I mean, I was excited to be a mom, but I also was like, what is a mom? And I knew all of the things that I had experienced, and I was like, well, that's not what I want for my kids. And I think for a long time I thought that those things defined me, and that they made me what I was, and that I was bound to that. I was held back by those things, but I feel like I use those things as a catalyst to just push forward and create a new path and not allow those things to harden me, but allow them to soften me, and allow them to make me see things differently, but in a good way. So use those things to create positive change and realize that that's not who I am.
Yeah, and it's kind of like it's a cliche phrase, but don't get bitter, get better. That's what I thought of when you're saying that the experiences and the hardships that you faced, you allow those things to make you softer and more tender rather than to give you a hardened heart and a hardened outlook on the world. And I think a lot of us do the opposite. A lot of us experience tough times and hard things and things that aren't fair and things that happen that we don't deserve and trauma. And it shuts us off to hope, and it shuts us off to love, and it shuts us off to positivity, and it gives us a negative worldview, and it just makes us hardened. It makes us people that value winning at all costs, and that value individualism, and that are very lonely people. But we do have a choice. We have a choice to do something different. We have a choice to allow those things to soften our heart and to make us open to new life, and open to finding hope where others see failure, and to being in relationships that are genuine, that are full of love and hope and peace.
Yeah, and I think that goes back to the self-talk thing, because it wasn't until I started really exploring how important that was for me, that I realized that for me, a lot of my self-talk, I felt like the victim, and I felt like I am stuck in this, I am bound by this, I'm carrying this trauma around like a ball and chain for the rest of my life. And when I really started to unpack that and explore what the self-talk to myself would look like if I was not the victim, but I was empowered to make choices for me, choices that I wanted, and choices that would affect my life, and create the outcome that I wanted, that really, empowered me. And that changed the way that I viewed this, opportunity of motherhood, in that I was no longer a victim of my trauma, but that I could really use it to become a better mom, to become a better person, and be able to hold all of that together and see that while I hated that I had to experience all of that, it wasn't wasted.
Even the trauma that you experienced wasn't wasted, because rather than be replicated in your life, you chose to use it as an example of what you didn't want to see and what you would not replicate for your children.
Yeah, it's like, when you're so appreciative of the sunrise because you've been in the dark all night. Like, that's how I felt. I've been in the dark all this time. Like, I'm ready to see the sunrise. And so the moments that I see God's grace shining through, I really feel like I get to not experience it more, but I almost feel like that sometimes, because it's like I've known the dark. And when you know the dark for that long, the light, even the tiniest glimpse, feels like it's shining so bright.
Yeah, and we've had to learn how to communicate with each other. We grew up very differently, and so we have different outlooks and different perspectives, and there'll be some times that I feel very, very pressured, like I'm not providing enough for my children, that our life isn't where it should be financially, that I want my kids to have the idyllic childhood that I had, and sometimes I feel like I'm falling short. Whereas you will tell me, like, hey, we're doing very well, like we are okay, because in comparison to how you grew up, our children don't have any of those problems. They don't face any of those hardships. What is it like to be a mom who provides the life for your kids that you weren't able to be given as a child?
I feel super proud and just very grateful that this is my life, that this is their life. I never really thought about them having anything else because I was going to do whatever it took for them to not have that experience. But it's huge. To me, that's, to provide that sense of security, that's huge for me, because that's one of the biggest things that you can give a child is a sense of security, and to know that you're safe and to know that you're taken care of are two very basic things, but for a lot of kids, they never feel that.
What role has your faith played in your journey of healing and in the process of becoming whole?
I mean, it's been everything, I think that if I did not have my faith, that I would not have made it this far. I felt a lot of times like I was just in this deep hole, and in some ways I felt like God's goodness and His grace reached in and pulled me out of that hole, because I probably would have just stayed there. It might have been a lot easier because it's been a lot of work, but I find hope in that, and I find hope in seeing all of the junk that the people of the Bible go through and experience, and they see God's goodness in it and from it, and to see that He uses anyone and everyone, and that He doesn't waste all the mess of our lives, and that even from that, while it's not good, goodness can come out of that and be born out of that.
Yeah, and I think if people listening to this have gotten nothing else from it, take the fact that your hardship and your trauma, it doesn't have to be wasted. That all the hard stuff that you've been through and that you might even be in the middle of going through, that while that in and of itself is not a good thing, it may not be something that you deserve, it may not be something that's fair, that even through those hard times, you can develop a resiliency. You can find an inner strength. You can set a course for yourself that will give you a future that looks nothing like those things, in a way that others that haven't experienced those hardships don't have the capacity. And that's a beautiful thing. That's one beautiful thing that can come from the messes and the hardships of life. What advice would you give anyone listening to this episode 41, that's in the middle of hardship or difficulty, that experienced childhood trauma, that's struggling as a mom, as a wife, as a father, that's just starting this journey of healing? What advice would you give them? We've talked about the importance of therapy. We've talked about self-talk. We've talked about having steady people. What advice would you give someone in that situation?
I think just keep going, keep trying. You're going to have setbacks. You're going to have days where, all of your baggage and stuff hits you back in the face. And you're going to have moments where it feels like you're taking steps back, but get up the next day and try again and keep going.
Yeah, it's a process. It's a journey. Your blog is called Where Grace Abounds. Charsy's blog can be found at charsygrace.wordpress.com. That's CHARSY grace.wordpress.com. It's some really solid writing. It's really good. It's inspirational stuff. I hope if you're hearing this, you'll take a few minutes to check it out. I'm encouraging her to write more, so hopefully she'll be posting more regular updates on her blog. But it's worth the follow. It's a lot better than this show. So if you listen to this, you'll definitely be blessed by listening to that or by reading that. But Charsy, I just want to thank you for being out here in the 105 degree. We both so sweaty, ready to go up inside his house with the AC in there. I'll be in the shed. I told y'all. But thank you so much for being honest and for being vulnerable and for sharing your story. It's a powerful story. It's a story of overcoming. You have the most beautiful heart and mind of any person that I know. And I am daily amazed by your beauty and by your strength and by your character, which is much stronger than my own. And I was excited to do this with you and to share this with others, because I know that there are people listening that experience some of these things growing up, and they've had a hard time knowing what to do with it as an adult, and that have found themselves struggling as parents and struggling in relationships. And it's important for people to know that you're not alone. And one thing we're going to do on In the Shed, aside from our new shows, is have these important conversations. And this was definitely one. So thank you so much for being with us tonight.
You're very welcome.
That's all for this week. You don't have to go home, but you can't stay here. I can't either. It's back in the house and out of the shed for me. Thanks again for listening to episode 41. Make sure to subscribe, like, share, and review. It really does help. If you have any paranormal experiences, opinions about sports, or politics that you'd like to share, you can email the show at intheshedwithwes@gmail.com. Again, that's intheshedwithwes@gmail.com. I might even read it on air. Look for us on Spotify, Stitcher, Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, the Good Pods app, or wherever you listen to podcasts. And make sure to follow us on Twitter at InTheShed4. Tune in again next week when we'll hit the headlines, talk some sports, and investigate together the phenomenon of feral children. This has been In the Shed with Wes Anderson, the best news show in the land covering politics, sports, and the paranormal. Have an adventurous and fulfilling weekend. I'll catch you tools later. Peace out, Boy Scout. Meemaw, we made it!